So there are about two things in Photoshop I would absolutely recommend for anyone who's running a publication, yearbook, newspaper. First thing I would recommend is looking at levels, brightness, contrast, the colors involved in the photo. So I've got a really dull picture here, and I'm going to bring up the levels. I'm going to go to Image, I'm going to go Adjustments and Levels right here, and that's going to bring up this window that has got a histogram in it. This histogram has three triangles underneath it, and the dark one, if you pull it to the right, is going to make the whole picture too dark. The light one, if you pull it to the left, is going to make the whole picture too light. What you want to do is find the right balance. You strike the right balance on this, and the whole picture looks better. The rule of thumb I've always understood was that you pull in the two outside ones so that they are even with the first tall peak. This is a rule of thumb, meaning that it's not always correct, it's not always true, but more often than not it is. So I'm going to pull this black one in so that it is right even with the first tall peak here. Then I'm going to pull the white one in so that it is even with the first tall peak here. The center one you can move side to side as you prefer. Once you're happy with the levels change, you can click OK. And I'm going to show you the difference before and after. Before, after. The window I'm using here is called the History panel. The History panel is represented by three boxes with an up arrow, and it functions like a totally navigatable timeline. I can go forward and backward multiple steps without having to undo and redo, which is very handy because Photoshop only lets you undo one action. If you want to undo two actions, you absolutely must locate your History panel. If you can't find it, you go to Window, pull down to History, and lo and behold, you will find your History panel. But it's usually right here, between these panels and your active area. A couple other things under Image Adjustments that are really important for having high quality photos that are the right color and have the right brightness and the right contrast. Well, brightness and contrast, obviously. I can bring my contrast up. That's usually something that helps in printed material like newspapers and yearbooks. Brightness depends on the picture. Another thing you can do if you are trying to prepare for a black and white document, if you're trying to make a newspaper or a yearbook page where there's not any color ink on that page, you can desaturate it right here and see what it would look like in black and white. And that's what it would look like in black and white. If you decided you wanted to go back and put it on a page where you'd have color available, History panel. So that is how you can do some really straightforward, very quick, very simple editing for color, for brightness, and things like that. The next thing I wanted to show you was how to correct imperfections in skin. So I've got this photo I tend to use for that lesson, and I'm going to show you these three tools. There's several tools on this list, depending on which version of Photoshop you have. I think there's 5 on there now, or 6, but there are 2 that look like Band-Aids and 1 that looks like a patch you would sew onto your jeans. Those are the 3 that fix flawed skin. The Spot Healing Brush tool will fix one blemish or one spot if you just click on it. The Healing Brush tool will take a spot if you draw from an area on the picture that is correct, and then you paint over an area that is incorrect. It will draw from the correct area and place onto the incorrect area. And the Patch tool lets you draw around a problem area and drag that problem area to a superior spot, and it corrects. So these are all 3 wonderful tools. And I'm going to zoom in on some problems in this photo. Right here, I'm going to start by correcting just one spot. So there's my Spot Healing Brush tool. And I've got my brush. If the brush size is too large or too small, you can change the diameter up here. Any tool in this bar has properties you can change at the top. But I've got about the right size for this, so I'm just going to click on this spot, because she's got a little blemish right there. And it corrects that little blemish. If I click right here, it corrects that blemish. I'm just clicking and letting go. I'm not dragging. There is a real tendency for people to want to use that and drag back and forth, and that seems correct when you're doing it, but it does something very odd. You don't want to drag back and forth. Definitely not. I'm going to go back into my history and undo that. The thing that you can drag back and forth with actually is the healing brush tool. The healing brush tool lets me select something that is good and move to something that is bad. Move it over onto something that is bad. So let me get to this lady's forehead up here. She's got some wrinkles on her forehead. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select this part up here that is not wrinkled, and then I'm going to use that as sort of the guide to paint over the part that is wrinkled. So to make that happen, I'm going to need to use my keyboard and my mouse. I'm going to put my finger on the Alt button on the keyboard. It's right next to the space bar. And with my finger on the Alt button, I'm going to click right here. That is selecting the area from which I am drawing my resources. Then I let go of the Alt button, and I'm going to drag across this wrinkle. And now it's gone. What it did was it used my resource of this area up here to correct my area right here. So you just Alt mouse click, so Alt click, and let go of the Alt key, and then drag. And that changes it. I'm going to Alt click right here, and then drag over that. Alt click here, drag over that. So that's pretty straightforward. You can get rid of a lot of blemishes, imperfections, wrinkles, things like that. Lastly, the patch tool. The patch tool is kind of great. What you can do with the patch tool is draw a selection around a problem. So there's a spot right here I want to fix. I'm going to draw a selection with my patch tool, just dragging kind of freehand around this problem. And I let go, it makes a selection for me. Now I'm going to click inside the selection to drag it, and I'm dragging it to an area where there is no problem. And it corrects. So right here, I'm going to get a patch and drag it. Right here, I'm going to get a patch and drag it. And you see how very quickly this is all going together, right? Made a lot of corrections in a very short time. So I can look in my history and see the difference before and after on that patch tool. Started like this, ended like that. It's not perfect, but it is pretty good. So if you've got a few photos that have one or two little minor imperfections, you can use those three tools pretty handily. You can also make sure the colors are nice and bright. Those are the two things I would recommend working on in Photoshop for any school publication.